Hello, everyone. You are all very welcome to our final Link and Learn webinar of 2024. My name is Dave Farley, Head of Membership Services at Learnabate, and I have the pleasure of being your host today. Before we get into today's topic, I would like to remind you of a couple of tools to ensure this event is as inclusive and collaborative as possible. Please use the option to add subtitles if required. Simply click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. You can ask questions in the chat on the right, and my Learnavate colleagues, as well as our speakers, are available to have a conversation. We are running a poll in relation to today's topic, which you can view by clicking polls on the right of your screen. Speaking of polls, we ran a poll this week on our LinkedIn account. Please follow us for our regular updates if you are not doing so already. The poll yielded some very interesting results, indicating that the majority of respondents feel somewhat confident of their ability to adapt to AI-driven changes in their industry. We are really looking forward to discussing those potential changes in today's conversation, both with our keynote, Dr. Arlene Egan, CEO of Roffey Park Institute, as well as our panel, Ciara Garvan from WorkJuggle, Siobhan Hanrahan from eBay, Declan McNiff from Realtime Recruitment, and Helen McMahon from Enterprise Ireland. Please take the opportunity in chat to discuss your own thoughts and predictions for the future on this omnipresent topic. Before we meet Arlene, I would like to extend an invitation to all of you to join us for our Bet Brunch, which we will be hosting with Enterprise Ireland in London at the Crowne Plaza London Docklands beside the London Excel on the 23rd of January at 11 a.m. You will have the opportunity to meet with lots of Learnavate members and key stakeholders, and we hope you can join us. Louise will add the registration link in the chat now. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Arlene Egan from Roffey Park Institute to the stage for our keynote. Welcome, Arlene.
Thank you very much, Dave, and thank you for having me today. It's wonderful to be part of this discussion, and I just need to preface that I don't really have many answers for you today. The topic is around critical thinking, and you know, it's actually more to do with how we are approaching the topic of AI and thinking about the questions that we're asking as leaders, whether that's in private industry, in education, in healthcare, no matter what your industry is. So it's really to start thinking about what questions we're asking and how we're planning for that going forward. So just to check that, there we go. Thank you very much, Louise. So to keep me honest and on track, I do have a little bit of a slide deck here. But before we get into that, I'm just going to give you a little bit around about my background and why critical thinking is of importance today to start discussing. So, you know, it's always great when you start hearing about these polls, like the LinkedIn poll that Dave just mentioned there, because it is important for us to be honest around our understanding of what's possible, but also what's practical in our industries, and how AI might be influencing decisions and influencing different kinds of trends and even expectations, whether that's from leadership, whether that's from staff, or whether that's from our clients and our customers. So I was very taken by, you know, the idea of how are we thinking about AI, and, you know, when AI becomes embedded in various aspects of our organizations or industries, how are we thinking about that? And so just to explain a little bit around my background. So while currently I'm the CEO of Roffey Park Institute, my past was, I suppose, extremely entwined with the concept of critical thinking. So part of my work, even in my PhD in psychology, I started to develop critical thinking frameworks to help people to think differently and to think effectively in terms of decision-making, problem-solving, evaluation, and analysis. And really the story of AI that we are hearing in the world today, you know, and my own interaction with AI, and everybody on the call today is going to have a different relationship with AI in your personal lives as well as in your work lives. But sometimes I'm even struck with how much I rely, without thinking about it, on the AI tools that I have already embedded in my life, whether that's my Alexa or whether that's my sat nav in the car. Sometimes I can follow blindly without actually engaging in a level of criticality or critical thinking. And so just thinking as leaders, as professionals, but also in our personal lives about this concept of AI and the skill of critical thinking, and maybe how we need to pay a little bit more attention to this skill as we go forward over the next 5 to 10 years. So just to begin, I suppose, thinking about AI and the stories that we hear. So the progress that we're hearing in the world that AI is able to do. And if we start thinking about the stories that we're hearing, let's start thinking about the ones that seem to be impacting industry and professionals the most. And this is kind of that whole rhetoric around, what about the future of jobs? What's going to happen to work? What will workplaces look like? And again, brilliant questions. Again, thinking about our questioning mindset and thinking about critical thinking, even at this stage, and futuring. What could the future look like? What are the challenges? But what are the threats? And, it's a great place for us to start our discussion today. So undoubtedly, every industry is going to be changed in the next 5 to 10 years, if not already. We're starting to see some progress in terms of healthcare, in terms of insurance, finance industries. We're beginning to see definitely we see that the touch of AI, the digital fingerprint of AI coming into different industries. So at a quicker pace than others. But all of us are going to be faced with how we start working alongside aspects of AI. So some industries obviously will be affected more than others. And the pace of change is going to be different as well. So again, the big question we all have is, what does this mean for the future of work? And how can we think about it? Can we plan for it? And so what I want you to just to start off is to think about those stories that you hear yourself in terms of maybe what can AI do? How can it benefit you? What is it about AI that might feel threatening to you, as well as those opportunities for doing things a little bit better, learning in different ways, etc. But we all have that narrative and we carry that with us. And I suppose part of our critical thinking is to understand what is the impact going to be on me, on my life, on my work, and on those that are impacted by my work. And so the stories are not going to go away. They're going to get even more enhanced. And as we work through the next few years, we're going to start seeing some clarity around the prospect that AI can offer workplaces, but also the challenges that is going to bring. And so if we just step back for a moment and I start thinking about the kind of conversations that I'm having with leaders in organizations all around the world, thinking about their AI journey. And, genuinely, no more than some of you on the call today, the amount of leaders that are on different phases of their journey around AI. And often, let's be honest, it has to do with level of investment, resources available in terms of the ability to integrate various AI solutions into workplaces. But every business is starting to think about this. And again, regardless of industry, what does it mean for me in my business? But the big question is, how can it add value? And there are some industries and some organizations that we work with that are just not yet in a position to do anything with AI because they haven't evolved their practice enough yet to benefit. In fact, the big thing about integrating anything in terms of AI or any other system is its value in terms of its fit for purpose. And so just even thinking about what is the value that this can bring. There's a lot of stories that we're hearing about, businesses, leaders, people within organizations being threatened because they see their competitors further down the road in terms of AI solutions. And how can I catch up and what can I do? And so again, sometimes we don't need to do much at the moment. We need to make sure that everything is right before we bring in AI. So one of the most important questions to think about from a critical thinking perspective is, how can AI add value to my business? Where are the opportunities for this? Because to bring in something, a new system, a new approach that is driven by AI, yes, we can solve some problems, but we're also likely to create some gaps and some challenges in other areas as well. So, our businesses really need to be ready for this from a process perspective, but also from a people perspective. And that's really what we want to think about today. So this is the first list of high-level critical thinking questions to start leaders and to start policymakers thinking about how AI can be integrated into organizations. So what's the value? What specific problems can it solve? How can it be integrated in a way that's not going to upset things very much? How can this kind of change be initiated? How do I get support from my stakeholders? And how can I measure success? So again, part of what we're thinking about here is just how can we develop a more questioning-oriented framework so that we're making decisions based on data we have, or case studies from other people, or genuine customer needs, so that, again, we're planning in a way that's going to lead us to success. So this is a sample of high-level questions, but in blue here, the question for you is, what are your high-level questions? What are you asking about this idea of integrating AI in, and how are you thinking about it? Because one of the interesting things that I've seen with leaders, again, all kinds of sectors, is feeling a pressure to do something. And again, this is where our critical thinking comes in, because it gives us that moment to pause and reflect and go, if I'm going to take an action, what is the best action I can take in order to solve a real business problem? Because there's many systems out there, and it can feel overwhelming for organizations to know even where to start. So always at the high level with critical thinking, and then we start to work down into levels that we're able to digest and make more sense of. So as we know, technology, AI, is an influencer in the landscape of business and education, but it's not the only influencer. And again, sometimes we can be caught up with trends and stories and ideas from contexts that aren't relevant to our own. And so if we just think about, the advances in technology and how that might apply to our organizations, the regulatory environment and how that might apply to our organizations, and our competitors and how we think about that. These are three key influencers that AI and technology are directly related to. But we also have other influencers that sometimes we can forget about in terms of their importance to our business. And it's worthwhile, again, stepping back and thinking about that blue question, what needs to be considered in your own landscape? Because maybe it's about regulation, and this can be a massive project for people to engage in terms of bringing in AI, or doing things properly with data in a different way if we're bringing in AI. So there's a lot to consider. There's not just the technology. What we know from the pandemic is that in many instances, our client expectations have changed. That's a massive influence on how we do business, regardless of sector. Our employee expectation has changed. Again, another massive influence in terms of how we do business. And so just thinking about AI in the context of other influencers, again, really key to get that step back moment. And this, again, is where our critical thinking can come into play. So if we imagine that the definition of critical thinking is the right type of thinking to solve the right kind of problem, again, in something like this, where we're really thinking about that journey ahead of us, critical thinking becomes one of the most important skills that we'll make time for as leaders, or as policymakers, or as key influencers, because without that, we can solve the problems of the day using the wrong kind of mental techniques. So just, again, thinking about how can we step back and actually look at the context we find ourselves in now and the direction that we're going into, because AI is an influencer, but it's not the only one. So how can we take stock and come at this with the perspective that we need? So the question becomes, what's important for you to consider if you look at your industry? What else? What are the other kinds of influencers that you need to think about in your own landscape? And how do they maybe connect into AI, or how do we think about them in a different way in order to plan for the future? So we've heard lots of different trends out there, and some of these you may be already using, some of these you may not have heard of yet. And again, in bigger organizations, we can see more solutions coming in. So we've heard of generative AI, I'm sure. We've got our multimodal AI, which does things in a different way, gives us different kind of models. But we're also seeing quite a lot of customized solutions. So being able to feel different, to look different, and to act differently, specifically to create a different experience within organizations. So, again, sometimes our competitors may be going down this road and we can feel like, we're not on par with them. Is this what you need? Is it not what you need? How are clients responding, etc.? So we also see AI in security, in cybersecurity. We see that AI being able to detect threats. Cybersecurity, from a risk perspective, we know is one of the highest risks to organizations around the world. It's very high on the risk register. And we know that AI can be an amazing ally to organizations in terms of being able to detect things. There's ethical and regulatory focus. We know that different regions are considering this in different ways. What will that mean for us? But a lot of organizations are looking at this bottom one, which is for workplace productivity. How can we build workplaces that are more effective and efficient? How can we take some of the repetitive tasks away and have AI take care of those kinds of tasks? We're also thinking about how do we integrate AI into systems so that some of the human connection, so you've probably all interacted with chatbots and AI that will respond to your questions, AI that might answer calls and direct you to the right departments. So we're beginning to see AI coming into organizations, again, different paces, to simulate a human experience. And this is an important consideration for us from a critical thinking perspective. How ready is our organizations for this simulation to happen? How ready are we to integrate AI into really human roles? And what's interesting is that the research is talking about experiences from the client's perspective. And often clients are rating, if they don't know, in a blind test, they're rating the experiences with AI, so chatbots or virtual assistants, higher in terms of their level of satisfaction than actually dealing with humans. So there's lots of studies coming out here that might feel a little bit itchy for us or a little bit counter to what we as humans would hope. Yet our clients are talking about things in a different way. So what does this mean for us? So these are some of the trends that we're hearing about embedding or integrating AI into workplaces. And again, it's not that we need all of them, but we need whatever is going to solve the problems that we have, and to start small in organizations at the same time. So we see these trends, and these are only going to get better and wider and keep improving in terms of their effectiveness in organizations. But we also know that from a leadership perspective, we're seeing AI help in different areas, such as decision-making, efficiencies, as we've spoken about, personalization and customer experience, which might surprise us because, we would hope often that humans can do this to such a high standard. And yet we're seeing in some areas that AI is able to do this effectively, and delivering the same level. Talent management and development, security, ethics, innovation and competitive advantage, and even emotional intelligence in terms of our leadership skills. So AI is able to support leaders in making decisions in different ways. And a lot of this is down to the fresh data that AI can give us if it's asked in the right way to give us that data. So what we find, and again, this is where critical thinking plays such an important role, is that we can be overwhelmed with the amount of data we have and how do we use that and make sense of it. So again, data is one thing. To be able to interpret that data, to evaluate the data, and to use the data in a way that's going to benefit ourselves, our leadership, and our organizations, and ultimately our clients and our stakeholders. That's the really important role for critical thinking. And for me, what I see with the leaders that I work with, again, it comes back to that really strange incident where I mentioned to you at the very beginning. Sometimes I will follow technology blindly. My car will tell me where to turn and I'll turn without question. Or, my Alexa will tell me something important and I won't question her. This is really where our critical thinking will come into play. How are we interpreting our data? How are we using that to make decisions on our talent, on our customer experience, on our competitors? What is it that we're asking, and how are we bringing that real human edge and that critical thinking into the mix when we're dealing with the amount of data that we're able to now generate through AI? So there's definite benefits. We need to bring that human side and that critical thinking into it to make sure that we're using the benefits as best we can. So in a nutshell, in any critical thinking framework that I've ever built, whether this is specifically for decision-making for leaders, or whether it's around creating a strategy, or just thinking about problems day to day, we always want to go as simple as possible with the frameworks that we build. So this is just a quick 3-step approach, and you'll get this later. So you can modify these questions to make sense for you, your context, and your business. But the first step is to ask questions. Ideally to ask the right kinds of questions in order to move you forward. But it's to really adopt a questioning approach so that you're actively engaging with the data or with the system or with the process, whatever it is in terms of the AI aspect that you're looking to integrate. So a sample of questions here. What does my business need? How can AI help? Where should I begin? And what are the consequences, intended or unintended, of bringing in an approach? So just thinking about these questions at the very beginning, can really help us, because again, I've met so many people that have tried to do something without this very first level of critical thinking. And yes, sometimes we can get it right, but often it can just be a big disruptor in the business that doesn't actually add in anything in terms of effectiveness. So when we can really understand what we're trying to solve, and again, this is where critical thinking plays a massive role, try to understand what we're trying to solve, it can really help us to just really enhance the quality of our decision-making from a very, very strong baseline. So what does a questioning approach mean for you? What kinds of key questions would you like to start off with in terms of thinking about your AI integration and plan? We would like to think that AI can come in and solve lots of problems for us. And terribly sorry, but my light is based on movement. We'd like to think that it can solve all kinds of problems, but inevitably we're going to think about it in smaller chunks. So if I'm going to bring in AI, should I focus on my processes? Should it be linked somehow to really bringing out the purpose of what we're doing? Or should it help with people, and whether this is building efficiencies into their work, or maybe thinking about talent mapping, succession planning, and the future of the roles of people at work in a different way? Bringing in any new systems, bringing in any new ways of work is always going to impact on these areas. So thinking critically again to step back and say, let me look at the wider picture and really get a sense of where I'm going to start and what the consequences, intended or unintended, are likely to be, and how can I start to manage that. So just thinking again and stepping back. So question one is thinking about our questioning approach. What kinds of questions are we asking? Question two is thinking about the consequences and really being able to imagine and plan for the pros and the cons so that we're best prepared. What we know from research all around the world is when we don't apply critical thinking in this way, what we see is a misalignment with business goals. So AI solutions that do not support the direction of the organization. And I'm quite sure you all are familiar with the frustration, the waste that particular issue can bring up. Poor data quality and management because you're not making decisions based on the right information. Unrealistic expectations. So again, you've got frustration, disappointment. You've got ethical and legal risks if you don't do this right. Resistance to change, and why wouldn't you? People don't see the value in this. They don't understand how this fits in. You've got security vulnerabilities, and you've got inefficient use of resources. So again, just even stepping back to create a framework for the team, for the organization to think through, to assess and to ask the right questions can save a lot of work, a lot of hassle, and obviously reduce risk as well. And so finally, developing a framework. So what's my challenge? Problem identification. And again, this is a framework for you to take, change it up, use language that makes sense to you, but at least it can help to give you a steer and make sure that you're ticking the boxes and not going through a process at a high level of, if you like, cognitive automation. Because again, just stepping back, creating that space can make sure that you're heading in the right direction. So what is the challenge that the AI can solve? How do I know? What are my options available to me to address the challenge? And how do I know? And often that's the trickiest one from an energy perspective, in order to make sure that you're following the right path. What am I really expecting from the integration of AI? Am I being realistic? And how do I know? So you keep seeing this question, how do I know? This is where we've got to be really honest, open, and of course use people around us to make sure that we're not being biased in our thinking or trying to take shortcuts, that we're talking to people and that we're getting, we're really challenging our thinking as leaders. How does the integration of AI fit with strategic priorities? Is it a nice to have, or do we need it? How is it going to be communicated? How can our project be resourced for success? Should it be now or should it be at another time? What effect will the integration project have in the organization? And who needs to help me? And where's the best place to start? So this is a critical thinking framework, so that again, we're going to mind ourselves as we're on our path. You're going to have questions that make sense to you, but ultimately from problem identification down to piloting, there's a lot of questions that we can put in that's going to help our questioning approach, that's going to help generate a critical thinking mindset, pay attention to the right kinds of data and measurements, and ultimately help us to avoid any big misses as we integrate, but also to reassure us that we're on the right track and ready to pivot as the data comes in. So Dave, that was what I just wanted to share with the group today, and just again get people thinking about how to think critically about AI.
Thank you, Arlene. Lots of considerations there for our audience today. I particularly love the questioning approach and why AI can help, being one of the questions that really resonated with me. So folks, we're now going to move to our panel discussion, and I'd like to welcome our panel chair, Ciara, to the stage, along with our panelists, Siobhan, Declan and Helen. Thank you folks for joining us today. Ciara, I'm going to pass straight over to you.
That's super. Thanks so much, Dave. And that was a fascinating discussion from Arlene. So before I kick off, I might just let everyone know that a small army of nice men appeared outside my door today. They're working on the road and they appear to be digging to Australia. So if my internet is slow, if I'm glitchy, if my sound is poor, I'm just going to step back and Dave will step in. But hopefully it won't happen, because I've been really looking forward to this discussion today. So my name is Ciara Garvan. I'm the founder and CEO of WorkJuggle. Siobhan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ciara. Hi, I'm Siobhan Hanrahan. I am the Director of the Learning, Quality and Coaching Programs for our Global Customer Experience teams at Egan.
Super, thank you. And Helen?
Hi everybody, my name is Helen McMahon and I lead on the client skills area for Enterprise Ireland, focusing on skills policy and skills strategic partnerships. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And Declan?
Hi, Declan McNiff. I'm Managing Director with Realtime Recruitment. We're tech and transformation recruitment, Dublin, Belfast and Boston. 20 years. Next year, roll on 2025.
Brilliant, that's amazing. So Siobhan, for the first question today, I'm going to turn to you. And I suppose what everybody would be very interested to know is, in eBay, how are you integrating AI in the design and the delivery of it into your training courses?
So first of all, I just wanted to say thanks to Arlene for that very thought-provoking presentation. I think there was a lot of what was in the three-step framework that was very much resonating with not only the journey that we've been on in eBay, but where we're heading. So we have been on a journey in eBay in terms of really looking at how we're integrating AI. And that really, I suppose, started a number of years back when COVID happened, and we looked at all of the training content that we had our teams on, and understanding how would we move that to a digital platform, because obviously we couldn't spend as much time as we would want in our instructor-led training. So that was one of the first steps that we took, was to stand back and say, well, what would it take to move all of our content online into a digital format? And at that time, as Arlene was saying, it was really around thinking critically to say, well, let's not just lift and shift and move content into a digital format. Let's look at this differently and see, how would we create content that our learners may want in the future? And instead of having blocks of training, to chunk it up into more bite-sized pieces so people could consume it in a much better way. So we started on that journey, as I said, in terms of designing what that future vision would look like, and started really in earnest about 15 months ago. And in conjunction with teams that we work with here in eBay, we also looked at not just looking at, particularly for our new hires, training them on 8 hours of content and knowledge and information on a daily basis, but really looking at, for our onboarding, how would we then introduce more of a flipped learning approach? How would we take the content of our data and actually say, is there parts of it that our teams could have self-paced learning on? Are there things that our teams could do better to understand foundational concepts? And then what we would do is bring them into classroom environments at a later stage or later in that afternoon. So we started piloting. So that was one of Arlene's other advices, was really to pilot the approach, because AI just doesn't happen first, right? You have to think of the digitalized piece, the understanding of, well, what do you need in order for AI to be maximized? So the digitalized focus on our new hire design is currently being piloted in terms of that flipped learning approach. But we're also looking at the design of our content and looking at AI tools to enhance the design concepts. So we're just recently embarking on this part of the journey. And by integrating AI into the design piece, we're actually able to design our training 9 times faster than what it would have been before, which is actually really leading into, reducing our lead times, being able to deliver on live to site content much quicker than we were. So we're also focusing on really looking at how does all of this, so moving our content into a digitalized platform, making sure that we have AI-enabled design to enable a faster live to site delivery, and then really looking at our overall objective, which is part of our 3 to 5 year plan, of really looking at personalized learning pathways that will then be enabled by AI.
That's so interesting. And I'm going to come back to personalized learning pathways in a second, but I loved what you're saying about, you didn't just do that lift and shift. Yes. You were looking at it, you were thinking about it critically. And I have to say, in WorkJuggle, we're the same in terms of our learning programs. I always say, just because we can doesn't necessarily mean that we should. And to me, one of the concerns about AI is it will create material for ad infinitum, but how are you doing things of real quality? And to me, one of the things that really resonated with me is, so the Oxford word of the year this year, the Oxford Dictionary word of the year is brain rot. Passive consumption of social media, really degrading all our intellectual rigor. And for me, that's what we need to make sure guard against on AI and learning, is that just because we can create everything doesn't mean that we should. And also, how do you bring in the group, the power of the group, that whole active social learning piece that really energizes and engages people. So I think we have very similar thoughts on that. So that's very interesting. So can I ask you, so when we talk about this whole piece around personalized learning, when people talk about AI and learning, it's all about the personalized data path. Is that something that you are working on inside at eBay? And do you see any risks associated with that?
Yes, so we are working on that. So as I was mentioning earlier, we're moving all of our content online and making sure that it's consumable as and when our stakeholders need it. So being able to kind of ring fence and bring everything into one location, we then just don't want to train for the masses. We want to be able to build personalized learning journeys to ensure that people have the content that they need when they need it. Now, there's massive opportunities with that type of approach when you think of increased engagement and retention, and really personalized learning pathways, tailoring content to individual learner needs and preferences and their paces, right? So you and I might enter into the same role and we're upskilled and planning to go in the same direction, but you might be a much faster learner than me, Ciara, and you might have a different approach to learning. But in the end, if we have those learning pathways, we'll get to where we need to be at the time and when we need to be there. And really looking at making sure that this customization is really focusing on the engagement levels of our roles and people that come into eBay. So staying motivated is really relevant to those that are really looking at personalized journeys. We're also looking at personalized learning outcomes. So not only looking at the learning pathways, but how does that impact business objectives and KPIs, and making sure that as we're taking these learner pathways, that there are assessments in place, and then also as well understanding how we can bring in gamification into learning pathways to ensure that people are motivated to succeed, but also as well assessed so that they're not necessarily moving on at the pace without actually understanding, well, is this impacting the business on where it needs to be? And am I actually delivering on what I'm supposed to be doing as part of my role? So that's something that we're looking at as well. So that's where data will inform us of all of this information, and making sure that AI-driven analytics in terms of that continuous improvement loop is where we'll gather patterns and behaviors, and understanding those preferences will allow us to continuously refine and improve the learner experience. Now, with those personalized learning,
and I just want to pick up on something you said there about personalized learning outcomes. I really love that. I think it's a very new way of thinking, and it's how we all have to flip our thinking away from that. You can actually have a learning outcome that's personalized and not general. I might just move on now, because I'm interested to know what Helen sees in her role, and what role do you see AI playing in upskilling and reskilling the workforce? Do you see it as a tool or a challenge?
I think it's both. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. I think with companies at the moment, we're doing an awful lot of work with them in terms of building their workforce planning capability. And I suppose tying into what Siobhan is saying, in the larger skills landscape, we're also looking at empowering the learner to own their pathways of progression and how they move, and are proactive in terms of the development of their career, and how that ties into micro-credentials, micro qualifications and bite-sized learning. So I suppose it loops back to being a skills-based organization, and building out, as Arlene was saying, your talent management capability within the organization, and how you proactively engage with the wider skills ecosystem to leverage what's available out there to help you to address those needs. So, for instance, I was just on a meeting earlier on with Solus about their micro qualifications that they're doing in AI that are targeted at individuals and companies at different stages of development, which is what Siobhan was talking about there. Some people may only need the introduction, some people need a deeper dive in terms of the technical capability, and some people in the organization on this will need strategic planning, strategic capability, and also how you change legacy systems within organizations. And I suppose we deal very closely with SMEs who I suppose would struggle in a different type of way to a multinational, and they wouldn't have the infrastructure of that learning and development OD structure in some cases. So how can we support them to navigate that journey, and not doing AI for AI's sake, but actually that it actually is tied in to the strategic priorities and the ambitions of the business and the learning journeys of the individuals, to attract talent, but also retain talent within the the business, and grow those pathways as they progress, really.
Yes, and I love that, not doing AI for AI's sake. And Declan, I might come to you, because I think recruitment, that's all something we all have skin in that particular game in terms of either hiring people or our own jobs. Where do you see AI playing a role there in terms of upskilling?
Yeah, thanks, Ciara. I would actually say I would agree with what Helen said there. It's both. It's great opportunity, but massive challenges. And basically, the chance to upskill, and that is a great thing. But there's the employee fear: am I being graded? Am I being constantly watched, etc., etc. So, look, if I had a job and I'm good at 80% of it, and AI could help me with 20%, or alleviate the 20%, or actually highlight that actually if we take the 20% off Declan and give him more of his 80% work, he'll be more fulfilled, more the right person, enjoy the work more, and more productive. You just have to be careful, to go back to what Arlene and Siobhan said. It's actually the adoption of it, the setup of it initially. Like, I remember the first time, and I'm sure there's other people online here, first time I caught my son using ChatGPT to do his homework, and it's a case of I wanted to give out to him, but at the same time, he was using it to get the result that he wanted. And in a microcosm, it's what we're all trying to do. If we can use it to get the result, and to get a higher value task, or what he thought was a better use of his time, and I'm not going to tell you what that was, but we can all guess what a teenager is about. But the idea is there that you can upskill. Are you upskilling? And get the upskilling right so that the person flourishes and moves forward. The reskilling is more difficult, because people fear change mostly. But if you can tailor and assist change and make it gradual, what Siobhan, Helen, and Arlene all spoke about, and personalizing it, that's a great way forward.
Yeah, and I love, Declan, what you're talking about there. Well, kudos to your son, first of all. He sounds very clever. I wouldn't worry too much about him. But also, I loved what you're saying there about flourishing and fulfillment. And that kind of brings me back to what I was going to ask you next, Siobhan, because I think we're all really interested. So, like eBay, this huge organization, global organization, you're going to incorporate AI, as we all are. But how do you maintain that human focus?
I think for us, we're really looking at AI as a companion, and enabling our teams to do really kind of skilled and higher value work, and take out that administrative burden that's currently there, particularly in learning design. And, as you can imagine, I talked about 9 times faster, but if we're able to design things using and supported by AI, there then has to be human oversight, right? There has to be validation. There has to be an understanding of, has there been biases provided in terms of what the AI has given, and then making sure that it makes sense and fits the business needs and the strategies that we're trying to deliver. And AI might not necessarily have an understanding of the wider strategy. So that human oversight and making sure that those who previously might have designed the content, created it, delivered it, are there very much moving into that validation space to make sure that that human oversight is priority. And as we're really kind of thinking about evolving not only how we actually look at the skills of our teams, but also as well what we provide training on, and really looking at creating more content around human connection, making sure that we're really focusing in on empathizing with our customers, connecting with them in ways that we possibly might have not have been able to before, because we were so busy on training on product and knowledge and information. AI will enable us to do that in a much quicker way, and then we can really rebalance and focus on the things that mean, the most important things for our customers. So that's what we're focusing on. And we're at a global level, though. We're currently using AI. I'll give you an example. We support customers around the globe, and around the globe you'll have multilingual responses that are needed. And previously, we would have taken that content and used people on our team to translate that content. Now we use AI to translate, and we use those who used to previously translate to validate that the actual translation was right. And it's much better, it's much quicker, but it's actually, you know, you mentioned earlier on that less of the mundane work, the work that actually, you know, it could take hours and hours and hours on a day and rinse and repeat, moving more towards quick, easy validation and getting a much better outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. And it speaks to all those human qualities around discernment, judgment, empathy, and a better use of people's time. Declan, I think one of the areas people do get nervous about is the recruitment process in AI. And maybe sometimes people get nervous around, is it going to remove that piece around empathy? Is it going to remove that piece around discernment and judgment? How do you see it working? And how do you see, I'd be really interested to know, how do you see this working right now, today?
Yeah, it's difficult. Like ourselves, we've just implemented a new CRM, and it's loaded with AI. So that manual task piece, there's loads of automation. Again, it's adoption and getting the adoption right. But there's a load of automation on it. From candidates are matched quicker. You can contact them quicker, identify them quicker. You can look outside LinkedIn, depending on the skill sets, whatever you need. But for a candidate, it can take. You can get to them quicker, but again, it's trying to bring that human piece in, because there's chatbots. There's a lot of chatbots not around now, and everybody knows that's a real frustrating experience for everybody. But if that's what a candidate gets as a first touch point and a last touch point, that makes it very, very difficult. But what I would say, implications wise for candidates, it's so hard to stand out now. Everybody can get AI'd up. You know, everybody can sound great, their profile can look great, their CV can look fantastic. So for employers, that creates massive challenges. And that's where AI might come in, actually, to try and counteract AI, if we can work that one out. But the other side of it, it's so competitive then. It's how do people stand out and be authentic? Like, that's going to be one of the biggest skills going forward. How does someone be authentic? Then there's the bias piece, which there's better people qualified in this call to talk about bias, because you can increase or decrease. I was at a talk recently and somebody said, if you put in a search into ChatGPT and said, give us a sample job description for a CEO, 99% of CEOs are male. So it comes back automatically. One of the first things it says is male. So bias and that. But the underlying thing, like, there's going to create loads of new opportunities. There's going to be lots of new roles for employees. Do we know what they are? Not yet, but therein lies the opportunity and the excitement.
I think that's so interesting what you're saying about, like, everybody can now look good with AI and ChatGPT. And I heard about a tool there last week. Apparently publishers now have a tool that can detect when authors have been using ChatGPT to write their manuscripts. And about people getting refused, I heard of someone getting refused a book deal recently, a published author, because it had been detected that they had used too much ChatGPT. So maybe that's something we're going to see down the line in recruitment. We're going to see, you know, that'll be the next AI. It'll be to detect itself within the process. We're in such interesting times. Helen, can I ask you, what do you feel are those uniquely human skills that we think will remain important in these changing times?
I think it ties in very closely to what Declan, Siobhan and Arlene have been saying earlier. People use terminologies like transversal skills, soft skills, human skills. But fundamentally, it's the same thing. I heard the LinkedIn CEO talking about learning how to learn being a really important skill in terms of your adaptability, active learning, not hiring people on the basis of what their current skill sets are, but their capability to learn more. As has been highlighted already, things like empathy, ethical judgment and decision-making, complex problem solving, working within a team, creative thinking, being able to work across diverse teams in terms of innovation moving forward. It's all of those kind of key areas in terms of your leadership and your leadership capability. And I suppose tying back to what Declan was saying there, a lot of the colleges, and I know LearnOvate have been looking at this as well, is how do you map the development of somebody through transversal skills? And they have a sort of a transversal skills element to their CVs, which helps with recruiters in terms of that selection process and bringing through those human skills so that they can actually see the capability of people in terms of resilience as well, and stress management, adaptability, ability to learn. And it ties back in, I suppose, to both what Siobhan and Declan have been saying there in terms of those human skill capabilities will give you a competitive advantage moving forward in terms of what companies are looking for.
Yeah, and so if I could build on that for a minute, what do you think companies should keep in mind when mapping skills needs in their organizations in terms of identifying gaps or also maybe future-proofing their workforce? What would your advice be there?
I think we're doing a lot of work with companies in terms of how are they, instead of being reactive in terms of how they plan for skills, that they actually step back and think about the strategic priorities, the goals, the ambitions for the organizations, what capabilities they need to build as businesses, and what skills are aligned to those capabilities. And then when you're looking at skills, you're looking at your human skills, your functional skills, and your technical skills. And how are you creating cross teams or capabilities within individuals to be able to build across those key areas? And I suppose it ties back into what Siobhan was saying, is having those bespoke targeted interventions that you can work with and utilize AI to identify where the gaps are in terms of mapping skill sets within the organization, and then provided targeted bespoke interventions to help individuals to grow capabilities and teams to grow capabilities within businesses.
Really interesting, and that kind of ties in with what Arlene was saying earlier. I'm looking at the time now, it's 1:51, and I thought we'd wrap up with one final question to everyone here, and that question is, if you had to make one prediction about the role of AI in shaping the future of work, what would it be? And Siobhan, I might go to you first.
I think we've said a lot of what I was thinking in terms of that prediction piece already, but I'll just reiterate it, where I really think that my prediction, and it's more probably near term than long term, will be that AI will take over a lot of the mundane, repetitive tasks and routine tasks that we have in our companies today, and then really enable us to focus on those, building those human skills, maximizing human potential, really focusing on the skills and capabilities of our workforce, identifying how those skills and capabilities then can match to what we need from the future. Everything that Helen was talking about there really resonated in terms of understanding the vision, the business goals of the future, the services that you want to provide, and then making sure that you're building the human skills and competencies and capabilities to deliver on those, because AI will enable all of that to happen, but they won't necessarily deliver it themselves.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you so much. Helen, can I ask you, what would your prediction be?
I think this was building on what Siobhan was just saying there. It's also creating now an opportunity, once some mundane tasks are taken away, to create innovation across teams and more diversity across teams. And I think that happens a lot in larger organizations and maybe not as much in smaller organizations, and that more innovation will come out of the opportunity to have diverse thoughts, creative thinking, sectors working to create together, and teams working cross-sectorally in a more of a sandbox type of creative scenario, and AI will provide an opportunity and a space to do that.
Okay, that's really interesting. Really interesting. Thank you. Declan, I'll come to you. What is your final prediction?
Yeah, just look, I firmly believe work fulfillment, because people will be doing more fulfilling and more challenging, that's in their sweet spot, will improve. And I also think work-life balance for the masses will get better.
That would be amazing. That would be a really positive one to finish on. If we've time, I might throw my own prediction. Do we have time? Would that be okay? I think that AI will not be, social media was absolutely, we opened the floodgates and it was presumed to be progress for all. I think now where we're standing at the moment, I don't know that we would have been so quick to embrace it. I think we see the impact in terms of social cohesion, polarization, and also the impact on our young children. I think AI will be questioned by the workforce. There's no doubt there's benefits, there's no doubt there's huge advantages, but it will not get the same easy ride that social media got, because we were wrong. I think we got it wrong. And AI isn't powerful, it's going to be incredible, but it will be questioned, and people will be right to question it. And that's why I think it was so great we had Arlene on today talking about critical thinking, because I think we'll expect to see a lot more of that in there. So that's us today. Dave, do you want to come back in and close off the session for us?
I'm back. Thank you, folks, for a really engaging conversation there. Lots to think about as we move into 2025. And Ciara, I'm delighted your connection stayed solid for the course of that panel discussion because you handled the conversation really well. I'd like to thank everyone for attending our final Link and Learn of 2024. Thank you again to Arlene, Ciara, Siobhan, Declan and Helen for bringing your expertise to today's event. That's a wrap, folks, on the Learnovate event calendar for 2024, and what a year of events it has been. We look forward to seeing you all in 2025 at numerous Learnovate in-person and virtual events, hoping we will see some of you in person at our Bet Brunch on January 23rd in London. I hope you are all starting to wind down for the holidays, and wishing you season's greetings from everyone at Learnovate, and enjoy the rest of your day, folks.